Welcome to Pure Happiness Coffee. Pure Happiness Coffee is a poem, an artwork, and a community dedicated to becoming better stewards of our world's favorite beverage. Each episode of Pure Happiness is a short glimpse into one individual's coffee journey, a journey that, finally, connects us all. As I conclude the first week of this new Pure Happiness Coffee podcast, I want to begin by once again expressing my gratitude to each of you who has listened so far. I began this podcast to recommit and focus on once again transforming my own relationship to coffee, our most beloved beverage. Pure Happiness has always been about taking a kaleidoscopic view of coffee, just as it, I'm sure, kaleidoscopically views us. New commitments, transformations, and changes are, well, scary. But it is with the breath of others that we might continue to breathe, and we might find our courage to persist. And so thank you to each of you who reached out with a kindness to me this week, who celebrated this beginning, and who encouraged me to continue. Let's be honest, there's a lot to despair over these days. In coffee, sure, but also in the world at large. And maybe I'm a bit sensitive to that plunging feeling when terror strikes and the world seems impossible to recover. In the same way, I'm sensitive to holding tight to those pockets of light that shine in the darkness. And while Pure Happiness does not and will not completely shy away from the troubling aspects of life, I also want this journey to emphasize what I have discovered along the way. People that are working to offer care, to bring joy, to keep something alive in humanity that could so easily die. Whether that's in the coffee itself in its joyous excellence, or simply in the turn of a caring phrase, the light touch of encouragement, or the comment shared in a DM. There is something in the world of coffee that is also not coffee, and I believe that is humanity, that is love, that is joy, and that is care. Episode 5, Verb Coffee Roasters, Boulder, Colorado. Today on Pure Happiness Coffee, I'm reflecting on a wonderful meeting I had with one of the founders of Verb Coffee, Mary Levingood, just a couple weeks after they opened their doors. I was in Boulder on an important poetics research mission with a friend of mine, Amanda Hurtado, because we had received a grant to study the kind of computers used by Barbadian poet Kamau Brathwaite to compose in his Sycorax video style. Though that's the subject of an altogether different podcast. We arrived before a long day in the Media Archaeology Lab at the University of Boulder to find Mary cheerfully immersed in her lean cafe, equipped with a beautiful Gießen roaster, baby blue origami pour-overs stacked on large, slender glass carafes, and a shiny new little Mod bar setup glistening in the sunlight. We found conversation easily, and Mary opened up about her and Kyle's love for coffee, especially their being enamored with Patrick Rolf's Copenhagen-based April coffee project. As the tendrils of delightful conversation unfurled about us, Mary graciously sampled their coffees for us, small offerings, kind welcomings. I remember each being excellent. I've seen now that since my visit in 2022, they've opened a new cafe in central Boulder. Congratulations, you all. And I thought that was pure happiness enough. I was only 2 months into writing Pure Happiness Coffee at that time, and I wasn't really sure exactly why I was doing it. I went ahead and wrote the following post about Gertrude Stein's love for verbs and Holderlin's notion that poets establish what endures. And I noted to myself there one of the reasons I began the blog. Because in the course of my travels in coffee, I had met so many folks like Mary, folks with an exuberant desire for compassion and care, folks who had clearly stepped too far into obsession with this mystical elixir, and folks that finally, if I had my way, everyone would meet. Sometime later, I received a message from who I think turned out to be Mary's mother. It had sadly gotten lost in a requested tab or something on Instagram, and I didn't see it for quite a bit of time. When I looked, very simply, I cried. She was asking for my permission to print my Instagram poem, to print out a copy and give it to Mary because it made her so happy. I was completely floored. sad that I missed the message for so long, and absolutely humbled by this request. For some period of time, I believe they even hung the poem up at the cafe. Poetry is like this. It's a leap, an act of faith, an expression of love in the uncertainty of the future, and it bubbles back up at you when you least expect it, days, months, years later, like a passing memory, a fleeting forgotten kiss, some notion left unsaid, or a simple act of grace that endures forever. Because this, finally, this is what humanity is. Just like a beautiful coffee you want to share with your friends, I started Pure Happiness in part just to share those great things I want other people to know about, like Verb in Boulder, Colorado. So if you find your way there, definitely give them a visit. As I sit here almost 2 years later now, writing and recording from New York City, and as I struggle with the deep despair that January can bring on, there nevertheless shines a powerful light still shining that shines still from that meeting. And it has been shining for some time, and it will shine on forever. As I close this, my first week of Pure Happiness Coffee podcasting, I would like to read a passage on the subject itself, happiness. This comes from Laura Riding's 1972 book, The Telling, itself an evolution of an essay published in the London-based periodical Chelsea in 1967. Riding was a quite famous and influential modernist poet. Shockingly, after many decades of influential work, she renounced poetry, an act that continues to shake us still from deep in the 20th century. There are many reasons why she did this, none of which have ever made any poet happy. She came to believe that poetry unnecessarily distorted language, that is, that it was an indirect way to communicate that always eventually warped what truth language itself had to offer. I won't get more into the technicalities of her beliefs, but suffice it to say that her giving up poetry had nothing to do with her giving up beauty or truth or anything else. Indeed, she came to believe that it was her human duty not to write poetry, but to tell the truth and to tell her story, a story we all must tell, and that in this collective truth-telling, we may find a new vision of humanity. She writes, "You have asked me about happiness. Happiness is necessarily related to a consciousness of something good of which one is sure. The degree of happiness is according to what this good comprises. If it comprises what relates to a personal condition of oneself, it is a limited happiness, subject to modification or even reversal. In the longest run, necessarily so. If it is a happiness concerned in a non-overridable essential, not overridable by any particular fate of a particular happiness, it is one's happiness forever. The good to which it has reference is one's norm of being. One has discovered where from one stems and where to one finally relates. Notions of happiness have surged in and around human life, flooding the empty spaces in it vaguely or gathering substance, sometimes forming islands occupiable for mortal whiles. Or they, notions of happiness, are erected into subjects of contemplation, instead of being set in the actual human scene. It seems to me that present preoccupation with happiness is broken into molecular notions of individual happiness, or into blocks of such notions that lack both a romantic, subjective duration and even a practical mortality, mortal existence. My concern is with our consciousness of the essential good and our sureness of ourselves and our sureness of it." March 16th, 2022. Stein, Holderlin, Verb Coffee. Gertrude Stein thought verbs were wonderful because they could be so mistaken. It was wonderful the number of mistakes a verb can make. Paradoxically, she means this as a compliment. Unlike durable, safe, hard nouns, verbs are infinitely pliable, flexible because they imply time and action and change in their very point of referent. what is done, how it's done, and how it will be done. Every verb can be so very many number of things precisely because verbs are not things, but actions, movements, commitments, happenings happening. Every so often, I've had the great fortune of meeting a special kind of coffee spirit, like a Zen monk on a mountain outside of town, or a poet like Hölderlin, towering over time with patience, respect, and poetry. This spirit exudes the love, joy, passion, and commitment creating truly beautiful aesthetic experience requires, and truly good coffee. Today at Verb Coffee Roasters was such a so often. Thank you so much for your conversation, your coffee, your hospitality, and your radiating enthusiasm for the pure happiness coffee inspires, if breathed up just the right way. Brewing coffee is a verb, and must be done, and is never done, and is done the entire time from start to finish, from bean to cup to sky. And these several coffees were such ephemeral bits of perfection, aiming at what seemed otherwise impossible, and yet bringing us close to something that moves among us we have never known. Infinite reflections of sky on water, a morphing geometrical figure in the dark, a glimmering light off slick swirled espresso, the glow of sun illuminating that radiant dance unique to this magic. Incredible Costa Rican and Peruvian coffee were on offer, all delicately and carefully and perfectly extracted. Words do nothing, so you must go there, now, to drink. Hölderlin, remembrance. But someone hand me the fragrant cup, full of dark light, that I may rest. It would be sweet to sleep among the shadows. It isn't good to stay mindless with human thoughts. On the other hand, conversation is also good. To speak the thoughts of the heart, and to hear much of days of love, and of deeds that occur. Poets establish what endures. Thank you for listening.